Hey, beautiful and brilliant Black mamas. Welcome back to For Black Mompreneurs, the podcast where we hold space for Black women who are mothers and entrepreneurs, unapologetically chasing purpose and prosperity. I'm your host, Femi Lewis. Today, we're talking about something that's been heavy on my heart lately, especially because we talked about analysis paralysis, imposter syndrome, and the meaning of rejection. And now I want to focus on finding the courage to keep pushing forward when everything feels impossible. So I want you to think about this. You know that moment when you're staring at your laptop at 11, the kids are finally asleep, and you're wondering if you're completely out of your mind, right? For trying to build this dream. Or when the rejections are piling up, the bank account is looking a little low, and your mother is telling you, you need to go find yourself a job. Yeah, we're going there today because courage isn't some mystical thing that some people have and others don't. It's a muscle we can build. And sis, you're going to need it strong for this entrepreneurial journey. So I want you to grab that coffee or your tea, your green juice, or whatever it's keeping you going. And let's dive deep into finding the courage to move forward, not just for us, but to make our ancestors smile, give our haters something awesome to hate on, and of course, more than anything, for our little people, or if we've got bigger ones, to aspire to become. So, let me get started with some real talk, right? As Black women, we're already operating in a world that we know was not designed necessarily for our success, and that every moment of our day we are working real hard to have our voices heard. And so we know that already, and we already walk with that. But add entrepreneur and mompreneur, especially to that equation, and we're already playing the game on expert level with no cheat codes. But here's something that I've learned after building my business while raising 2 kids. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's showing up anyway. It's that decision you make to keep going at 2 a.m. when you're updating your website while your toddler sleeps on your chest. It's saying yes to that networking event even though you don't know anyone there and you're a little afraid of what it'll mean to be in a room with that many people that you just don't know. It's entering that pitch competition when you're not certain of what you're doing. You just know you have a story to tell, a need in your business, and you're ready to ask for what you want. See, courage isn't optional in this entrepreneur game. It's part of our survival. It's even greater part of our sustainability. And when we think about success, it's really about courage. Every single day, we're making decisions that regular employees don't have to make. No one is ever going to save us. We have to take care of ourselves. So we're constantly asking ourselves these questions. How much should I charge? Should I take on this new client? Should I pivot my business model? Should I offer a digital product? Can I afford a marketing strategy? Is this partnership worth the risk? Those are the type of questions that we always have to ask ourselves, that we have to make a decision for ourselves. And we have to do those, and we have to make those decisions with courage. We have to ask these questions of ourselves and force ourselves to make decisions because we know that making a decision is moving forward for our business. And as moms, we're not just betting on ourselves, we're betting on our children's futures. We're modeling what it means to operate with a growth mindset, to be creative so that we can create. We're betting on our children's futures. We're modeling what it means to operate with a growth mindset, to be creative so that we can create generational wealth and show our children and our communities what is possible if we take a few steps forward. Courage provides us with the agency to create new narratives for our families. So let me just highlight that idea about creating a new narrative for our families. There was a day not too long ago that I almost quit and I started looking for full-time jobs. I'm in an interesting stage in my business. I'm getting my own clients, and I'm also still getting contract work through different agencies. And I'm at a place now where I'm not just making ends meet, but I am doing the damn thing, right? I'm also incredibly tired because it's a lot of work, and then I have children, and I've got this little podcast passion project. I'm learning to take risk in my business, but it's scary, right? And sometimes it's scary to go out on a limb and ask for help, but I'm learning those things. So anyway, in that process, I wondered one day if I should really just go back to work. Like, would it be so much easier to do that? And I began to revise my resume, and I even began applying to a few jobs. But in this process, all I could do was think about my business and how much I enjoyed creating content for others. And then that afternoon, something really interesting happened during pickup. My daughter shared something that really solidified why I needed to be more courageous in my business and be able to take more risks. She says, "Mommy, I Googled you today. I showed my friends who you were. I showed them your website and your articles. I told them I'm going to be an entrepreneur like my mom. And they only believe me, Mommy, because your photo was there and because you picked me up after school." And I was like, wow, that hit me like a truck because it wasn't just about me anymore. My daughter was learning what it meant to be a woman who had the agency to create her own path and define her own dreams. And in that moment, I really realized that giving up on entrepreneurship was not teaching her resilience. It was teaching her that when things get a little hard, we quit and we run to safety. So finding the courage to step out of safe spaces, or the courage not to run to safe spaces, is something that all of us need to do, but is honestly sometimes incredibly difficult. I mean, who doesn't want to feel safe? And so let's think about it. First, when you play safe, it means survival and in some ways guarantee comfort. In my family, there are plenty of professional women. My mom is a retired teacher. My grandmother was a psychiatric nurse. Both had careers that provided me with a certain level of comfort growing up. And for a while in my life, I too was an educator. It was safe. I got paid twice a month. I had a guaranteed 2 months off in the summer. I got a good pension. And I had benefits, but it truly wasn't my calling. Being an educator was my calling, and that's why I do what I do as an entrepreneur, but in the class, absolutely not. So when I made the decision to try out entrepreneurship, I was met with side eyes. How are you going to get paid? When will you get paid? You won't have a pension. And I get it. Both had acceptable, respected professions for women, but neither had taken risk in the way that I had. They chose these paths that they chose because who doesn't want to be able to take care of themselves? But they also taught me the power of having courage to even go out on a limb and become educated and enter a profession, because those are things that were in many ways limited to a lot of Black women. So they've given me the courage to do things different, because honestly, playing it safe doesn't change our family's narrative. Second, we're dealing with imposter syndrome on steroids. Society tells us we don't belong in boardrooms, that we're not CEO material, that we're not capable of being president, that we should be grateful for whatever table scraps we get. And when you hear that enough, you start believing it. But it's not true. And you have to have the courage to stand up and do things, even if you don't immediately see a win. Third, and this is all speaking to us as mompreneurs, we are sometimes stretched thin between managing our businesses, raising our kids, sometimes even having to be the primary breadwinner and do that, and still trying to maintain semblance of self-care. We're running on empty. And when you're exhausted, everything feels scarier and harder than it actually is. So we've identified our struggles with courage and why it's easier sometimes to take another route. But honestly, that means nothing for us, our families, or our community. We have to build our courage every moment of the day by making decisions and learning lessons. So here are some solutions that will help us through. So the first thing I want you to do is start with your personal why. I'm not talking about some generic, I want to help people why. I'm talking about the deep soul level, why that makes you ugly cry when you think about it. For me, it's the moment that I realized that I wanted to be a full-time work-at-home mom. I wanted to do this entrepreneurial journey, and I really realized it when I was writing an article. I was pregnant with my son and had pulled over on the side of the road to conduct an interview. I'd been writing an article and needed a source, and it came through just as library story time was over. I'd gotten my daughter in the car and the phone rang. A publicist was offering a solid source, but they only had a few minutes. So I said, sure, because I didn't know if I was going to have another opportunity. I said, I can talk to them now. So I gave my daughter an applesauce. I told her, mommy has to be on the phone for a few minutes, so please give me a little bit of space. And she nodded in agreement, and I got my notes together, and I did that interview on the street, on the side of Gun Hill Road. So if you know anything about New York City and the Bronx and Gun Hill Road, you know that was no small feat. And when it was over and I hung up, I felt like I'd won a tax-free $5 million. And I said to myself, this is all that I want to do. As I grow as a mother and an entrepreneur, my why is growing. It's the vision of my daughter growing up, knowing that women in our family are business owners, not just employees. It's my son starting a business at 8, creating stickers on Canva or selling his lemonade and setting up a way to sell them both. When your why is that deep and that personal, that is connected to your legacy, it becomes easier to find courage because you're not just fighting for today. Because you are not just fighting for today, you're fighting for generations. Here's my second idea that I want you to think about. I want you to reframe your relationship with failure. You know, we so often think about failure as doomsday, and like we've kind of been conditioned to think that way because in school, if you fail and you don't excel, then there seems to be lots of consequences associated with that. But here's what they don't tell you about successful entrepreneurs. We fail more than anyone else. And when we fail, we find ways of getting back up and doing it again and doing it smarter. We see failure as data, not as defeat. Every no is information. Every failed product launch teaches you something about your market. Every client who doesn't want to work out shows you who your ideal client actually is. And when I started tracking some of my failures and what I learned from each, I looked at this idea completely different. It's not crazy. It shifted my perspective, and it continues to shift my perspective. So I'm not afraid of failing because what you going to do to me? Who's going to check me, right? I just got really curious about what I could learn. The next thing I want you to do is build your courage network. And I think this is really crucial for us as Black women. We need to understand people. Let me say that again. We need people in our corner who understand the unique challenges that we face, who are going to celebrate our wins without jealousy, who call us out when we're playing small. So I want you to find a group of women who are going to do those things for you. Find your people. It might be, women and men. I want you to join some organizations, business owners who are doing the damn thing. And if you can't find it, build it for yourself. But don't try to do this alone. You need support. And sometimes that support comes and that courage comes when you're with other people. I want you to practice courage in small doses. You don't have to start out pitching for Shark Tank. There's nothing wrong with starting small and thinking big, but you got to start small and do the damn thing. So I want you to apply for that grant you've been looking at for months. I want you to reach out to that potential collaborator. I want you to raise your prices by 10%. Each small act of courage is going to build your confidence for the bigger ones. It's like going to the gym. You don't start by deadlifting 200 pounds. You start with the short 5, 10 pound dumbbells, and you work on what you can handle and you build yourself up from there. The next thing I want you to do, and I've mentioned this in many ways, about having like a file, I want you to document your journey. I want you to take pictures of yourself at that network event where you knew no one. I want you to screenshot those client testimonials. I want you to keep a list of every obstacle you've overcome, because here's what happens. Our brains are wired to remember the scary stuff and forget our victories. But our victories are huge. When you have physical proof of your courage, of your growth, of your resilience, it becomes harder to convince yourself that you can't do hard things. So think about this. I'm going to share another quick story. 2 years ago, I was invited to speak at a conference of 500 attendees. I was a little afraid. I didn't know anyone there, but I did it, and I did it well. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said no, I could never do that. I probably wouldn't have even applied to speak there. But I had been building my courage muscle, and I looked at my courage documentation, those photos from smaller speaking events, the fact that I had done things in work camp before, and the positive feedback that I'd been provided at workshops. And I use those all as reminders of the scary things I'd already survived. And I said yes. And you know what? I killed it. And not only did I kill it, but my daughter was there. My daughter was able to see me speaking. My daughter was able to see me interacting with other adults. And she was able to look at me in a different light. And that moment taught her more about courage than any conversation that I could have given her in my car after school. So this brings me to the part that's going to get me really emotional every time. Our children are watching everything that we do, and I mean everything. So think about it like this. When we're teaching our kids their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, we're also teaching them a hidden curriculum about life, about possibilities, and about what it means to be a Black woman in this world, or a Black person. Because every time we choose courage over comfort, we're showing them that it's okay to dream big. Every time we get knocked down and get back up, we're teaching them resilience. And every time we bet on ourselves, we're showing them that they're worth betting on too. But here's the flip side. Every time we play small because we're scared, every time we talk ourselves out of opportunities, every time we say people like us don't do things like that, we're teaching them to limit themselves. And we don't have space for that. So I often think about my grandmother when I think about courage, my maternal grandmother. She was a really brilliant woman, ahead of her time in terms of understanding like the link between drug addiction and recurring disorders, right? People having mental health issues and using drugs to cover it up, and even the use of treatment like methadone. So she started her career, early on. She was a CNA, and then she became an LPN. And when she started making moves to become an RN, an older white nurse told her she was making good money for her family already, and she should just focus on the present. Like, why do you need more schooling when you've already done this and you're comfortable? Thank God that my grandmother ignored her, right? Because what she was able to do next in her life was phenomenal, all because she ignored one person. She became an RN, and then as a grandmother, she filled the lifelong dream of attending Howard University. And at 50 years old, she obtained a master's degree from Ohio State University. I was 5 years old, and I really didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening. But today I'm almost 50, the same age she was, and I more than understand how much courage it took for her to make all the moves she ever made in her life. And when you think about it, what it meant for my mother to see her mother doing those things. And as I grow, like I said, I understand the magnitude of what she did, even though she had a very safe job. I understand the magnitude of what it took for that courage. So the courage I'm building today isn't just about my business success. It's about building on a legacy of courage and pushing past limitations that others place on us. It's about creating a new narrative of what's possible in our family line. So when my daughter sees me pivot on my business strategy of instead of quitting when something doesn't work, she's learning adaptability. When she sees me networking and building relationships, she's learning that success is about community, not competition. When she sees me reinvesting profits back into the business, she's learning about delayed gratification and strategic thinking. We can't just model courage, we have to talk about it too in age appropriate ways. I tell my kids when I'm scared but doing something anyway. I share my failures and what I learned from them. I let them see me prepare for big presentations, for pitch competitions. Like that day I took them to Dave and Buster's and was like, go run, play, have a good time. I'm working on something. Doing the work that courage requires. This is what it is. So last month, my 8-year-old son announced that he wanted to start selling different flavors of lemonade. Instead of saying, that's cute, I helped him come up with flavors. We created some prices, marketing, and where we will sell. Neither of us know what will come until we hit these New York City streets and start selling. But he will have the power of courage, promoting himself, learning lessons along the way, and his mother right behind him. Building courage isn't just about surviving today's challenges. It's about preparing our children for their futures. The world they're going to inherit is going to require even more courage, more adaptability, more resilience than the one we're navigating right now. By watching us push through fear, by seeing us fail and recover, and by even witnessing us build something from nothing, they're developing their own courage muscle. They're learning that scary doesn't mean impossible, that different doesn't mean wrong, that being the first doesn't mean being alone. I want you to think about this. What would you attempt if you knew your child was watching and learning from your courage? What risk would you take if you knew it would expand their vision of what's possible? Because here's the truth. They are watching and it will expand their possibilities. So we've come to the end of our time together, but I want to leave you with this. Courage is not about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and showing up anyway. It's about taking the next step even when you can't see the whole staircase. It's about remembering that you come from a long line of women who have survived impossible things, have overcome tons of people trying to limit them and their abilities, and doing that so that you could be here and build impossible dreams. Here's what I want you to do this week. Write down your deep why, the one that makes you cry, the one connected to your legacy. Identify one small act of courage you can take this week. Maybe it's sending that email you've been drafting for weeks, or posting on or about your business on social media, or reaching out to the right potential mentor. Document it. Take a picture, write it down, tell someone about it. Have the courage conversation with your kids. Tell them about a time you were scared but did it anyway. Remember, every successful Black mompreneur started exactly where you are right now, scared, uncertain, but willing to try anyway. And even if you have reached success, you still are doing that. You're doing things that are scared. You're facing uncertainty, and you're always willing to try. The only difference between all of us is time and consistent action. So here's my ask for this week. You can join our 4 Black Mompreneurs Facebook group. We're continuing to have these conversations all week long. I want you to share your courage wins, ask for support when you need it, and share on your sisters who are fighting the same battle. And if this episode spoke to your soul, I want you to share with another Black mompreneur who needs to hear us. Tag us on Instagram at 4 Black Mompreneurs and let us know what act of courage you're going to take this week. Finally, before I let you go, I want to remind you of one more thing. Your courage isn't just changing your life. It's changing your children's lives, your community, and the trajectory of generations to come. So take that scary step, make that bold move, bet on yourself one more time. Your future self will thank you, and your children will rise because you showed them how. Until next week, keep building, keep growing, and keep pushing forward with courage. This is 4 Black Mompreneurs. I'm your host, Femi Lewis, and I want you to stay courageous, beautiful. Have a great week.